It's about Tartarian Christianity. Whoever heard of that? Not me. I had never heard of Tartarian Christianity. Genghis Khan. It literally means King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and he was probably the greatest conqueror that ever lived. And you could say that he ruled with a rod of iron. Because of him, Christianity spread across the earth like a flood.
I think it's just sort of weird, just even all these books about Tartaria and the Tartars. It's kind of just a strange thing that we're just never told about these people existing. If you look up Genghis Khan, he was Mongolian, but I think that maybe that's is that the psyop?
Yeah.
Is that they call it Mongolia versus Tartaria?
Tartaria. Genghis Khan went to Jerusalem to free it from the pagans and to restore it back to the Christians. My thing is, where are the Tartarians today? We've found way too much evidence to dismiss them as some myth. We know the Tartarian Empire was in fact real, and there's still remnants. Their architecture is still all over the place. Where do you guys think they went? And where did Gog and Magog go? That's what baffles me.
It does seem like it's just a very obvious thing that it is covered up in this kind of way.
Welcome to another episode of Question the Narrative. We've got our good friend with us, JT, here today, and we've did several episodes with him previously. It's always a blast to have JT on. My trusty co-host, Ricardo, over here. What's up, buddy?
Hey, how you doing, my brother? It's good to see you.
Doing good. We got some interesting stuff for you guys this week. This is information that I've just recently came across. It seems like some of it is very accurate. Like I said, it's new information, and you can consider it conspiratorial if you want. It's about the Tartarians, the Tartarian Empire. I just found it really, really fascinating. Kind of wanted to share it with you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely.
Yeah. Ricardo, did you get a chance to read that leak? Read the rest of it?
I got through like half of it. I didn't get through all of it.
Okay.
Because you know what's funny is I started going, when I was reading that article, I started going down like these complete other rabbit holes. That's why I started sending you those books and stuff, because it was referencing like these other things. And I'm like, well, what's this? And so I just got completely off track, and I'm like reading this book that's saying, and I sent it to you too, JT, about 1,000 years of Tartarian Empire or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's interesting. 1,000 years. It's
Yeah, every time 1,000 years is mentioned, it's like an eyebrow raiser.
It's like, bing, what's up?
Yeah, what was that? 1,000 years?
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, it is super interesting. So one of the things that caught my attention, let me just get a second to pull this article back up here.
Yeah, and we should leave. Would you want to leave a link so other people could check it out too in the details of the show? Okay, yeah, because guys, it has like tons of old maps and all kinds of cool stuff that you guys can look into and just consider. Like we're just speculating here, that we're not saying this is or isn't for sure. It's just interesting information that you just put in the back of your mind, and you can save it for later if you ever need it.
What's the book called?
It's an article that someone has put together that is like us, that has gone way down the rabbit hole researching Tartaria, the millennial reign, the little season, all that stuff. So he's put a bunch of clips from old history books on this article. These are all old books I had never even heard of. And some of this information is from the Apocrypha, from 4 Esdras, chapter 845. Another one from An Accurate Description of the New World, written in 1670. Relations of the Most Famous Kingdoms, 1611.
That's an interesting year.
Yeah. That's the year.
The KJV, right?
King James, yeah. Another one from Giles Fletcher the Elder, 1584. Library of Biblical Literature, 1850. I mean, this guy did a ton of research, and it had to have taken him a very long time to make this website.
Oh, here. Yeah, it's very, very detailed. Even on all these maps, he has some overlays. He has arrows pointing here. He has underlying text, everything. He's done a lot of research, definitely.
Yeah. So I think the way I kind of interpret what this guy's saying, so you got to kind of overlook the title.
Okay, so just so everyone knows, what is he saying? Just so we can have that as our context. Which this sounds crazy, guys, but this is what he's saying. This is his speculation.
Yeah. Okay. So this guy's speculation is he was kind of speculating on whether or not, and it's gonna sound crazy, but you just gotta read through this. The title is the Inuit. Am I pronouncing that right? The Inuit,
maybe
the Inuit,
yeah.
Thule, and Tartarians. Was Genghis Khan the second coming of Christ? Now that sounds crazy. I know that's I almost didn't read the article because of that title. But
yeah, that does sound a little crazy.
Yeah, it does. But we know how they like to twist up, morph, twist our history. You know what I mean? Who's to say that some of the here's my theory on it, and maybe this is this guy's thinking as well. What if all of these conquests, like if the millennial reign did already happen, he already reigned for 1,000 years. There was obviously a bunch of books documenting Jesus's conquest because it said he ruled with a rod of iron, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what if some of the awesome and great things Jesus did while he was reigning got twisted and, renamed? Like, what if it was really Jesus Christ doing these things and they renamed it Genghis Khan? That's one theory.
Yeah.
And
yeah, possibly.
You can tell they've altered the dates of these history books because they have turned J's into ones and ones into and I's into one.
Well, the whole thing about like the chronology, I can't remember if you were on the podcast the one day I was reading some of that I found an article because I was going back through some of the old like Gunnar Heinz and stuff. I was looking back down that rabbit hole and I found this article that was talking about Fomenko and Heinzen. The thing is, it's like that basically the Western Europeans gave everyone a chronology. So it was like that India and China had this ancient history, but they didn't have chronology until the British gave it to them. So it wasn't, I want to say that they didn't give the Chinese a chronology until maybe like the 17th century, 18th century. And India did not get a chronology until the 19th century.
Oh, wow.
So when it comes down to it, it's like that the stories, like Heinzen was saying, the stories are true or could be true. He's not throwing out the stories. He believes that there's enough evidence that that there's whatever history is, those things happened. And obviously we could, depending on who wrote it, they might be telling a biased account of it, but there's these stories that are told over and over again. Those stories are true. What's not true is the way that they're chronicled in the orders they're chronicled in.
Right.
So yeah, like the stuff here, that's what I think this should just almost be like just a catch-all for everything on this channel. Unless it's really recent, just throw the dates out. We're just talking here. We'll because we can maybe eventually say if it fits with something the Bible says, we'll try to put it closer in our minds, at least to the times of Jesus and the times that we believe he came back.
Kind of going to scroll down here halfway because a lot of this, it's about Tartarian Christianity. Whoever heard of that? Not me. I had never heard of Tartarian Christianity till I read this article. But apparently, the Tartarians are a big reason why Christianity spread worldwide, because it says in this article that with the help of Genghis Khan, or because of Genghis Khan, Christianity spread across the earth like a flood, across the entire world like a flood. And weren't we weren't taught a lot about Genghis in school, but what little bit we were taught, wasn't he demonized? Weren't we taught like he was this evil emperor, evil ruler?
We were taught that probably like he was a conqueror. I always heard that they say that 10% of either Asia, I think, or the world is like has some of it in his DNA, is what they've said. You ever heard that?
Yeah.
No.
I've heard.
Yeah, probably like everybody's related to Solomon and King Genghis Khan, because Solomon had 1,000 wives and concubines, and we don't know how many Genghis had. Jason Jack actually mentioned that Genghis Khan means universal king.
Oh, wait, I was... Stop.
Or universal...
Stop.
Oh, sorry.
That's about what I was going to get. Spoiler, yeah.
Spoilers.
Since you already brought it up, let me.
But no, we can get back to it. Just let's go in order. I got it pulled up so you guys can just tell me how to scroll.
Okay. Well, you already mentioned it, so I really want to get this part out of the way. So people realize.
Well, that's a good way because it is so crazy to say that
it's crazy.
Genghis Khan was actually Jesus. So let's go with the strongest evidence first.
Right. Yeah.
Scroll. We'll double back.
Okay. Scroll down. I'll tell you when to stop. So apparently, the name Genghis Khan literally means King of Kings, Lord of Lords. Where have we heard that from? Revelation. And what else does Revelation tell us? That in the millennial kingdom, Jesus receives his new name. I've got two wild theories to throw at this. No, first of all, that could possibly be his new name, Genghis Khan. It literally means King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and he was probably the greatest conqueror that ever lived. And you could say that he ruled with a rod of iron. This article says that because of him, Christianity spread across the earth like a flood. This was huge. I mean, huge. So that's one theory, right? The other theory is that whoever wrote these stories changed the name for whatever reason, probably trying to cover up and hide the millennial reign. That's another theory, but I just feel like that's super interesting. And Genghis, Jesus.
So Genghis, if you see there too, that it's Jesus was born in Nazareth. Genghis was born in Azareth. That's like,
come on.
That's kind of weird.
Now you see, Jesus was called the Son of God. Genghis was called the Son of God.
Jesus was actually not born in Nazareth. He was born in Bethlehem.
He was from Nazareth, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that they probably shouldn't have said born.
Yeah, they shouldn't have said born. Body location for Jesus, non-existent. Obviously, because he ascended into heaven. Body location for Genghis, non-existent. To this day, nobody knows where his tomb or his body was laid. We don't have no evidence of his death. That's interesting. And the fact that the Tartarians played such a huge role in Christianity, I never knew that before.
And that's interesting too, because in this article, I don't know if anyone had caught it at the top, but it's also saying that they believe that it's possible that the lost 10 tribes of Israel was actually in Tartaria or something. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's another thing that really caught my attention with this article. See, today we have no idea who the 12 tribes of Israel even are or where they are. Well, according to this, 10 of those tribes were situated right there in Tartaria, and 2 of the tribes rejected Jesus as their Messiah. They denied that he was the Son of God. So basically, those 2 tribes kind of got cut off and they went their own way. That was the tribe of Benjamin, and what was the other one?
Was it Dan?
Yeah, Dan was like the first one to go.
Yeah, so Dan and Benjamin. So that's more information I never knew.
Benjamin hung on longer, right? Because obviously Benjamin is is with Judah for a while. Benjamin, they were bad in the book of Judges, but then they kind of they saved them. Because even Paul was a Benjaminite.
I'm going to read this little article to them in case they can't see it. Sometime after the migration of the Tartars to this place, and about the year of our Lord, where we heard that, the year of our Lord, that makes me believe that this was going on during the millennial reign.
Why? Dude, that's I 62. That's like 62 years in.
Well, okay, them pictures I sent, if you zoom in on the date right there, that first letter, look at the space between it and the next one. That almost looks like an I and a 1 and a 162. Or it could be like Ricardo. It could be II 62. But I'm thinking it was the year of Isis 162, possibly. Because it even says year of our Lord.
See, the thing with me is the dates are meaningless. I think that the dates don't hardly mean anything, because if you actually do look into old books, sometimes the I's look like 1s and sometimes they look like J's. And so that it's lots of people have made the connection that oh, it's just 1,000 years. It's like it's deliberately deceptive, and they just did this. But it is weird that sometimes they do look like that, because I've seen it, like where I've read the book and I've looked at the different characters and they're not consistent, and I don't know why, but it is weird. And at the same time, it's like that. I guess I really am pretty convinced of the Gunnar Heinsohn stuff. So it's like that. I feel like the people who lived after the cataclysm, they really didn't know what date it was. And I think that that's like, so that whether the, so I don't think that you could ever look back and find correct dates that are after whatever was the time, like the original dating system.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Because like it just like you just cannot find accurate dates. So, but it is interesting. Yeah, like obviously the year of the Lord definitely has to come from a worldwide acceptance of Jesus, for sure.
Yeah, a start date. Yeah,
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's read a little bit of this to the audience. So, although the exact year is unknown, Genghis Khan was born sometime around, and again, we don't know about these dates, how accurate they are. He was born sometime around 1150 AD in the vicinity of Azareth, became king of the Tartarians, and began overspreading the earth like a flood on a Christian conquest by the 1200s. If nothing else, this has given me like the vibes of the White Horseman, who was given a crown and a bow, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. A lot of people associate that with the Antichrist. I don't see how they're drawing that conclusion, because nowhere does it say that first horseman is the devil or the Antichrist. In fact, Jesus is the one that rides on a white horse, and Jesus has the crown because he's the king of all kings. But anyway, there's some more connections between Genghis and the first horseman later on. Okay, so sometime after the migration of the Tartars to this place, about the year of our Lord 1162, they proceeded to elect theirself a king, a man who was named Chinggis Khan. His original name, Chinggis, do you know what that means? It means blacksmith or of iron. Again, another reference to Jesus, what he ruled with, a rod of iron. One approved integrity, great wisdom, commanding eloquence, and immense for his valor. He began his reign with so much justice and moderation that he was beloved and revered as their deity rather than their sovereign. So here we have a Christian empire.
That's interesting.
I mean, that's pretty interesting too. But
yeah, and guys, on all of this stuff, you could see where it has a reference.
Yeah,
you can actually click on that and you can look at everything. He's just picking out just these little screenshots, but he has done a great job to source everything that he's getting it from, and so you guys can just click on that source and it'll blow up whatever you want. You know, it's got a lot of old maps. You can look at all the old maps and everything like that too. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, just so everybody's not confused about the name thing. Genghis Khan, his name wasn't always Genghis. The Lord changed his name, like he often did with his, disciples, his prophets. So his original name meant blacksmith or of iron, and then they changed it, and then it started meaning King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Scroll down to this big article, because there's one in here where Genghis receives a vision from a white horseman in white armor. And that is super interesting. It sounds a lot like the book of Revelation. Is that it? Yeah, that's it right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you read that one, JT?
Yeah, I can read it. It happened that a poor old man, being a smith, saw a vision in his sleep, namely a man armed all in white armor and mounted on a white horse, which calling him by his name and said unto him, Cengiz, it is the will and pleasure of the immortal God that thou be Lord and ruler over the nations of Magali. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And that be delivered from dominion of their neighbors, under which they have long remained. Oh, that's like weird, right? Okay, and they shall rule over their neighbors and receive tribute of them in whom they formerly paid tribute. Cengiz, hearing the word of God, was replenished in exceeding joy and made publicly known the vision which he had seen. But the rulers and commanders would not give credit to the vision, but rather despise and mock the old man. But the night following, they themselves saw the vision of the horseman armed in white, who commanded them from the immortal God that they should be obedient to Genghis and cause all to obey his command. Whereupon all the said, the chieftains and governors of the 7 nations of the Tartarians, calling the people together, made them yield obedience and reverence to Genghis. Then afterwards, placing a chair for him in the midst of them and spreading a black felt carpet on the ground, they set him thereon, and then they 7 chieftain rulers, lifting him up, did a place in his throne on the chair and of state, and the great triumph and acclamation, calling him Khan, their first emperor. Is it Khan?
Khan,
is that,
yeah.
is,
Which means
yeah,
king or king of kings. Does that not like remind you of Revelation with the white horseman and all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely some interesting language the way it's used. Of course, the way, could it also be that God spoke to this man and he kind of put him in charge of this area too? That didn't necessarily have to be Jesus, but it doesn't mean that this thing wasn't provided by God. Obviously, we know that nobody has authority unless God gives it to him anyways. So pretty interesting either way.
Yeah, if nothing else, that could be what the author is saying, that through people like Genghis and all these other, I'm sure there were other kings, many other kings that received instructions from the Lord during the 1,000 years. It's like maybe he's saying that this was just part of the second coming, was the Lord ruling through people like this. Because Jesus said that, we would be kings and priests unto the Lord during the millennial reign. And obviously this is one of the kings of the Lord. Because in that vision, he acknowledges that there's an immortal God and it's not a him.
I think it's just sort of weird, just even all these books about Tartaria and the Tartars. I don't know. It's kind of just a strange thing that we're just never told about these people existing. It's really weird. Yeah, and they're on all these old maps. I don't know. To me, it's like I've never heard a good explanation why that is the way it is.
And what's crazy is I was listening to, which this is kind of on topic in a sense with the Tartaria, but there was this video where this person was talking to one of those AI things, which I'm not a fan of that. I don't do that, but I heard him asking, like, if you basically wanted to control people, like what exactly would you do, what would you do? And in that thing, they were talking about like destroying the history and making people believe in lies. And then it actually even mentioned Tartaria in that AI response. I'll have to find that video and send it to you guys.
I've seen it. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that's not how I use ChatGPT. I literally just ask it kind of like history questions type thing. I see it as a more advanced Google. I know some people see it as sorcery. I'm not. I don't agree with that position. When you're treating it like it's some kind of oracle, then I think that that's different. Versus if you type the same question into Google, like, is that okay? Versus a more advanced Google, it has a memory that like a regular Google does not, and I think that's the big difference. And you can get sources from it. But yeah, that's interesting that if it is more candid. I'm always skeptical of though when people talk to ChatGPT in that kind of way, and it puts out these very cryptic
but it wasn't
answers.
ChatGPT. It was like it was Thoth or something.
Oh yeah, or whatever. Well, that's one's called literally after it.
I know,
like a god.
I know that's the one that they were talking to. It's crazy.
Well, I just kind of wonder too. It's like could we even verify if that's real? Like they could obviously make a voice say whatever they wanted to if they're setting up a video too.
Yeah.
It's all right for tomfoolery if you wanted to make a outrageous TikTok, right?
Yeah.
So what else is interesting? This very next article, the Tartaria 229 there, from the most famous kingdoms of 1608. I can't hardly read it on the screen, but I can read it better right here. Most part of all the nations of the Tartars, except Varchini, who are
not subject.
Some of it's written in Old English. That's how you know this is from actual old books.
Yeah, it's written in the same exact way as like the Geneva Bible.
The Geneva Bible. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Those words were tripping me up. It was just like,
yeah.
Me too. Yeah, so yeah, I keep forgetting in the Geneva style, the F's are actually S's,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Okay. Who are not subject to the Great Khan. They
yeah.
fight on horseback, and their weapons of choice are the bow and the arrow. And that's how the Battle of Armageddon, was described, as fought on horseback. And what I would like for people, I'd like to challenge. This is a little bit of a thought, a thought challenge here. Do you think that we could summon a 200 million man army on horseback today? Because apparently the Battle of Armageddon was fought like 200 million horsemen, right?
Mm,
Is that, have you ever heard that?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
okay, so I mean, I've heard that. Whether or not, I've never did the math to check and see if that pans out. So back then, I could totally see, because that was their means of travel, was horseback.
Hmm.
But today, I was doing some research. I was thinking, let's say the whole world got hit with the EMP, and we were suddenly slung back to the Stone Age. Could we even find 200 million horses? Guess how many horses are in the entire world right now? Only
58 million.
only 60 million horses, roughly. Count.
I was literally just looking
Wow.
at I was just looking it up. Yeah.
Dang, you're fast. And that's counting the wild ones,
He's
right?
tracking.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
tracking.
I was listening. Yeah, like yeah. Well, I remember
So
that girl Kay Podgy. She was debunking the little season, and she's saying that could not have happened because there was only about a blah 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 about 100 million people back in the first century. But yeah, she didn't do her horse math.
she didn't do the horse
She
math.
didn't look that up. There's not enough horses.
There's not. There's. I don't know what made. I guess that when I was reading this article, about the horseback and the battles and everything, I was like, could we even get our hands on 200 million horses today? Because hardly anybody knows how to ride a horse, much less owns one. And then you look it up, and 10 million of those 60 million are wild horses, right? JT, ain't that what it says?
Oh, I didn't even look at the details.
Yeah.
But I think the thing about that specifically where that verse comes from, I think that's coming out of Revelation chapter 9. I think that's a spiritual thing. That the 200 million person army or being army, because I mean, if you really think about it, an army with 200 million people is beyond anything anybody can even imagine anyways, because like there's never been anything like that in a war. So I think it must be akin to something, because it's preceded by having talks about the bottomless pit being opened up, and then all the crazy entities that come out. So I think it's a spiritual thing, but it is interesting when you have futurists putting it in modern terms. It doesn't make a lot of sense the way they try to wrestle with that.
Yeah, it literally doesn't make any sense how they try to wrestle with that and put it in, in today's times. Just how we don't know how dense the population was in the first century. For all we know, there could have been more people on this earth back then than we have now. But my thing is, regardless, who is more likely to summon a large army of horsemen? You know what I mean? Them in the first century, or us, in 2025, where the big portion of this country rides around in Ubers and taxis.
Yeah.
They don't even own their own car, much less have a horse or a way to get a horse.
Yeah, maybe when all the Tesla charging stations get knocked out, then everyone's going to go back to horseback, and that will bring about the end of days.
Yeah, and I agree with you, JT, on that, because I actually kind of did a video on that 200 million army number, if you want to call it an army, but it is those beings that are coming out of the bottomless pit. And I had speculated in that video that what if a lot of those same beings are the ones that are gonna be a part of surrounding the camp of the saints and stuff like that, because it talks about the numbers as the sand of the sea, right? So it's going to be a lot of people, but I don't think it's going to be like, each individual sand grain that you would see on the sea. It just, in biblical reference, it just means like a large number. There's going to be a lot of them, because it even says that Israel, even though they shall be as the sand of the sea, a remnant shall be saved. So it even uses that to the children of Israel as being the sands of the sea. And so like you could just use that same terminology. It's just like, it's going to be a lot of people. or a lot
Yeah.
of something, the number of the sand of the sea.
Yeah, you know, like when the Bible gets very literal, it gets literal. I think that there is like poetic, prophetic language because yeah, I was actually just reading that. I must have been probably in Deuteronomy or maybe it was in the beginning of Joshua because it literally says that basically that promise to Abraham about the stars in the sky. I think it mentions that was fulfilled, and so now he's given you this land like in the book of Deuteronomy, or yeah, it was either Deuteronomy or Joshua that it actually said that though you be of the sands of the sea or the stars of the sky, I think.
Yeah, so I do think that's what that's talking about, but like even the horseman argument, because there's actually futurists that believe that as well. I'm guessing, they would interpret it like maybe in a literal sense. So that would even debunk that part of that too, if they believed it was a literal for a 200 million horse army.
Yeah. So I don't know what pops into your mind when I'm reading this here. Being indeed, I'm skipping halfway down that article in the middle where it's underlined in red. That's where I'm going to start.
The underline in red, the second one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, right before that it says they shoot strongly and surely out of their bows. Indeed, being indeed so skillful in the art of shooting that they commonly pierce all kind of armor, and if they happen to be routed, yet they fly in troops and bands so well ordered that it is very dangerous to follow or pursue them, because they shoot their arrows backwards in their flight, wounding and killing ofttimes both men and horses that pursue them. So I don't know, every time when I'm reading this, I keep thinking about that passage in Revelation where he was given a bow and a crown. The bow and arrow was the Tartars' weapon of choice, right? And obviously they conquered all of Asia. That says that because of them, Christianity spread across the earth like a flood. I don't know why my mind keeps going there. It may not even be related. But
you know what all that bow and arrow stuff and flying and shooting backwards, it reminds me of like that video game Zelda with Link and all those. It's like an angel creature that shoots bow and arrows and stuff like that. It's almost like the way I read it there, it doesn't even seem like it's humanly possible.
Oh, dude, this is crazy. Okay, so the next little verse, I must have skipped over this. The next little paragraph down there from what I just read.
The Holy Ghost one?
Yeah, the Holy Ghost one. So look at the underlined passage at the bottom. Then they set the crown upon his head. What did I just? He was given a bow, then he was given a crown. That's crazy. I don't know. I really don't believe that the white horseman in Revelation is the Antichrist anymore. See, they made us think Genghis Khan was an evil Asian dude, you know what I mean? That just went around slaughtering people. But really, he was very revered, and it says that he ruled with a lot of integrity and morality, and he was just highly esteemed, highly revered, and highly respected by everyone.
You know, on your point about the Antichrist, though, yeah, many people have said the white horseman is the Antichrist, but yeah, I mean, the word Antichrist never even shows up in the book of Revelation.
No.
And also, why? So, what are the other horsemen? Like, why is the white horseman the only person who's a person?
Right.
Right.
You know, like I think that's kind of interesting because it's like nobody says, "Well, who do you think the red horseman is?" I've always wondered who I think obviously it's going back. It's like a throwback to the book of Zechariah, and then you have these spirits. I mean, I don't think that they're human at all. I think they're all spirits. It's like a spirit goes into the world, and then this happens. So like it's like you're letting loose these kind of entities in there, and maybe that's pushing the men to do certain things.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean,
that's kind of what I think too. It's not an actual like physical thing, but once it's kind of like the trumpet and vial judgments, it's like that. But like once this is released or whatever, it says, and there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. So wouldn't that just be like wars? rumors of wars and stuff
it's like
like that.
It's kind of like almost like the idea that in like the Greek mythology, so who's your god of war? It'd be like Mars or Ares is release. And so what does Ares do? Does he start the war? Does he start the wars? Well, he obviously puts this spirit in the men, and then the men start doing things that it's kind of out of character. I think that the truth is the way we were taught Revelation is obviously wrong.
Oh yeah,
from the very beginning. So it starts off wrong, because I think that the horsemen are somewhere inside all the other judgments. It's, like, it's not like this 4 things happen and then the other things happen. It's like they're all happening at the same time. Even it makes sense that, like, I've always tried to think about like the book of Revelation. It's like, so when the seals are getting broken, it's like you have a scroll. And so if you break one seal, you can kind of see part of the scroll, but you're still not seeing it in order. So they're only reading parts of the scroll, and like you can't read it chronologically until it's all the way open.
Yeah.
And so the way, that's why, and of course John is getting different views from earth, he's getting views from heaven, he's getting different perspectives. So that's why, like, there's repeating events. But because obviously when you read the seals, it's like, when you get to the 6th seal, Jesus returns.
Exactly.
But that's obviously, he doesn't return at the beginning of the book of Revelation. He returns.
Well, that's what they say is basically like the rapture,
They try to say that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's God's judgment too. I mean, that's the thing. It's like that all this stuff all happens because, like, in Revelation 19 and Revelation 6, the same thing happens, is that Jesus comes back. Yeah,
because in Revelation 6 there at the end, it's even saying that they're asking for the rocks to fall on them at that point too.
That's the end. That's kind of the end right there.
It says in verse 16, it says, "And said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand?" Not a one.
Yeah.
Not a one.
Yeah. So this next passage here, I guess this guy, I don't know why I forgot about that. I don't know if he's trying to make the same connection my mind kept going to, which we got to remember, Genghis was visited in visions by a white horseman. So yeah, like kind of JT, what you're saying, it is a spiritual thing, right? This white horseman was a spirit, and he was telling Genghis what to do so that he could go on these conquests and help spread Christianity, which was obviously the will of God. And I'm reminded that Jesus told the Pharisees plainly, they asked him when the kingdom would come, and he said, it will not come with observation. You won't be able to say, lo, here it is, or lo, over there it is, for the kingdom is within you. So maybe, I don't know, maybe Jesus ruled from heaven, from New Jerusalem, from heaven.
The more I thought about it, it's kind of maybe similar to the way it was in, like, basically in the Old Testament.
He ruled from the clouds, basically. Did he not?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking
that's my take on it, because I think it's really interesting, and I know that Gunnar Heinsohn put Constantine in the 1st century, but even if he wasn't in the 1st century, I think it's really interesting that the way that Constantine was converted was that he saw a sign in heaven, which was some kind of a double cross, like a cross with like the 2 posts.
Yep.
And what he was told in this vision was, conquer in the name of this.
With this sign, it's like conquer.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's really interesting. And I know that some people who we've been doing research in this, it's like, I think that looking at like the early Roman Christians and painting them all with the modern Catholic Church, I think that's wrong.
Oh yeah.
At some point, like, they converted from their pagan ways, and some people would say they still kept pagan traditions. Whether they did or they didn't, it's like that people here trying to be Christians, it's kind of like pointing to Joel Osteen and saying Christians are doing it wrong today. If that's what your example of like what you thought Christianity was. It's like, there's obviously lots of people doing it wrong, but the fact that somehow Christianity got spread during this time, it must have been a good thing. It actually does make sense to me that, like, that to me makes more sense, that that's what Jesus meant when he said he's going to rule with the rod of iron. And that's why I said you could even use.
That's crazy. I just had like I had a little moment there just thinking about that.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like, I think that
You had ambassadors here on this earth to basically just keep everyone straight.
Yeah, right.
People like
that's
Genghis.
what, to me, I would say that that's what ruling with a rod of iron would be like, because you could even use, let's just say we believe the mainstream history totally. I could basically prove this view through that, and the world would say that when the European Christians came over here, they did wicked things to the native populations. The native populations were sacrificing themselves to demons.
They're heathen
on top of pyramids and doing all kinds of satanic things. So if the God of the Old Testament, who's, Jesus, God, they're the same yesterday, today, and forever. So if they sent a people that was not perfect over there to judge them, that to me sounds like how God rules with a rod of iron.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not like, he used the Israelites. We know that they weren't good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Not always.
And even that's exactly what Moses tells them before they go into the promised land. He's like, don't ever think that you're getting this land because you're so good. It's because the people here are so awful. It's not because you're good. It's because they're worse.
Yeah.
And then eventually they were worse, and God used Nebuchadnezzar to judge them.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of just like that promised land analogy too, JT, when we were talking about it in that Matthew 24 stream. God isn't afraid of war. You know what I mean? Even in the Old Testament.
He's a man of war. He's a man of war, right?
He's a man of war. Yeah, he's not afraid of that. The promised land, that's what it was, the promised land analogy. Like he's getting them to that place, right? And he's not afraid of who he needs to clear out of the way in order to get that done. So he's not afraid of that stuff, is my point.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct. Yeah, it makes sense. Actually, I think that this is probably the view that makes the most sense to me at this point, without any kind of proof that like a physical Jesus was ruling. Like I think that there would be a lot of proof of that. Even if, again, even being in the little season, I do believe that some of the skeptics of this community would be correct when they'd say that there would probably be more about something like that. Now, obviously, we do know there's the iconography in the churches of the saints and Jesus himself. But typically, it looks like Jesus is reigning from some kind of heavenly place, because he's usually depicted as being up above.
In the clouds,
right?
too, yeah.
Yeah, he's usually depicted as being somewhere in a heavenly place. So, yeah, that's how God influences people today. And to me, I think that if the kingdom is within, he's using us to go do the work of the kingdom. So it probably was like that during even the 1,000 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what made the 1,000-year reign? So what we're saying is that we believe most likely Jesus reigned from the heavens, from the clouds, from heaven, the heavens above. That he wasn't physically here on this earth himself, but he was using people, he was ruling and reigning through people like us, whether he was sending angels, visions, whatever. And it does seem like that would be the most logical case, given the lack of physical evidence that we have of Jesus being on this earth for 1,000 years. But what made the 1,000-year reign so significant, right? We keep with what we haven't mentioned yet. Satan was bound during that time.
Right.
So there was no opposition against the Holy Ghost, against the kingdom, against the spread of Christianity. It just spread like a flood. It would, right? The devil's not here to resist it. Yeah, and that's kind of this is another vision that Genghis got. After that, Genghis Khan had subdued all the kingdoms and the countries on that side of the mountain of Belgium. He saw another vision in the night. For the self-same horseman, armed in white armor, appeared unto him again, saying, Genghis Khan, it is the pleasure of the immortal God that thou pass over the mountain of Belgium and direct thy course westwards, where thou shalt possess kingdoms and countries and subdue many nations. So I think that's
insane.
That's insane. So that's
the Belgian mountain. Like where? I mean, is that like in Belgium?
Maybe,
because that's interesting. Because if you look up Genghis Khan, it was like the Mongolian Empire. But I think that maybe that's the psyop?
Yeah.
Is that they call it Mongolia versus Tartaria, and that's really where the real disconnect is here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting though is like that. I guess the thing is like we're really not taught anything about Genghis Khan. The idea of like what kind of belief. It actually is funny if you look him up. It says he promoted religious tolerance or something like that, which is really weird. It's like really weird to say that. Yeah, because he's like that. Does that really seem kind of contrary to kind of what we're told about him? Because what we're taught about the Mongols is they were like savages.
Right.
That's weird. Like, you know what I mean? Like that. So why would he care about like religious acceptance and he had like a coexist sticker on his horse?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, JT. This next one, this is where it gets into talking about the lost 10 tribes. Just down here under where obviously this guy was maybe making some connections with the White Horseman, and my mind kept going there too. But anyway, let's go down here. Was Genghis Khan a Christian?
Okay, now this is what we need to hear.
Yeah. How many of you guys have heard of Timbuktu or Timbuktu or Tinduck?
I've heard the expression, Timbuktu, but I had no idea what that meant.
No, what is it?
Neither. Well, this references it. Okay, so it says the lost 10 tribes were sent to Azareth, an area also called Tinduck on many maps. I just found that, kind of weird. Tinduck on many maps on this Christianography map of Christianity. What this map is a spread showing kind of, I guess, where Christianity started in this area and how it spread everywhere. Tinduck was kind of what I understand it to be like the headquarters for the Tartarian spread of Christianity. Okay, that's how I kind of understood this. So from 1636, the only place with many Christians is the Azareth Tinduck area where the Tartarians reside. As you get further and further away from Tinduck, there are less and less Christians. Almost as if Christianity spread from the area of Tinduck to the west and the south. There's that Timbuktu. Sorry that.
Yeah, that's weird. That's really weird.
Maybe that's...
another thing, because I know that if you guys saw the thumbnail, I made
it. Hey, JT, you could click on that map and it'll blow it up.
There you go.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, Tinduck.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's weird. But I was saying like that if you guys had seen the thumbnail that I made, I showed the Great Wall, and I was kind of depicting like what you might see as Moscow. Like me and Ricardo were actually talking about how they have like very unusual architecture in Russia with the onion domes. I think the only thing that might be comparable is what we're told about is like, kind of medieval mosques kind of have maybe like an onion dome kind of a thing. I think it seems really clear to me now, like without knowing too much more than this, is the Great Wall of China. If you guys aren't already aware, it faces like basically where you would shoot arrows from. It faces into China. The high side of the wall is on the Chinese side. So what we're taught, what we've always been told, is like the Mongols were like these savages, and so they literally had to build a wall in order to keep them out.
Yeah.
But it seems obvious now that
it's the other way.
It's the other way around.
The wall was kept to keep the people in the China area out. And what was really weird is when we had Paul on the podcast one day, he was mentioning like there's this weird loop in the wall. There's like this circular section where it's almost like something was meant to be kept in to this place. And of course, China was like the land of the dragon. I think that's probably something that Marco Polo wrote about. Yeah, there's weird stuff there. So it kind of makes sense that in places in India and China, it does seem like where it has some of the older remnants of like really satanic traditions.
So you think that they had to set up the headquarters closest to that place to keep it at bay even more so, you think? Is that what you're kind of going at?
Yeah. Well, it makes sense that you had like you set the wall up over a smaller section of your empire because the empire outside of that's really big. It really makes no sense for a smaller country to build this wall that's gigantic and it supposedly took like over 1,000 years to build.
There you are with that 1,000 years
No one would ever do that. Like, it makes no sense. If you could build a wall like that, what you could afford to do is go kill all the people who are trying to get in.
Absolutely.
That's a more economical, it makes more sense to do that. So it's like, it's a way more powerful nation builds this wall to keep a lesser nation at bay. If we did it, it would be more like akin to the United States building a wall to keep immigrants out from the South, not the other way, right?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, didn't they teach that? Yeah, obviously they used to teach it was the Great Wall of China, but like you said, you can look at it and tell it was built to keep China out because the high
Yeah.
part where you would stand behind it with an arrow, right, is facing China. Why would China, if it's China soldiers on this wall, why would they leave their backside exposed? You know what I mean? To the opposite country. Why would they leave
Yeah,
that part exposed? It makes no sense.
Well, I think the more obvious thing is the fact that, like, if you look on the one side, it's real easy. It would be real easy for the people on the quote unquote Mongolian side to get up the wall because the hill goes up the wall.
Yeah.
You know, and then you have the other side is real steep where like you could not climb it. So like wherever the windows face, it's more obvious that like, yeah, it would be real hard to keep people out when you actually have a hill right next to their side of the wall.
Yeah.
They would actually have a better position later because they'd be able to get up and shoot at the people in your place.
Exactly. Okay, so there's some other maps if you want to show them. The pretty cool maps on that article.
Yeah, let me
old world map.
I think just scroll that one, JT.
There's another one of Tin Duck.
Which one you want to see? Tin Duck. Let's see a bigger one. Did they talk about the Great Wall at all in this?
Kingdom. Okay.
Look,
Tin Duck.
There's Gog on this map.
Yeah, I know. I saw that.
Oh yeah. And look what it says right here, Tin Duck, the kingdom in which Christians ruled in the year 1290. That could have been 290. I mean, we don't know when it was, really.
Bro,
but
look at the other side of the map. What is that place called?
America.
What in the world?
What?
What year is this?
It's supposed to be 1290.
That doesn't make a lot of sense from what we're told. That's really weird.
Look at the smaller box down below the big red one, the little red one. That looks like
Mongol.
That looks like a J before the 2 or an I.
Yeah, there's Magog right there.
There's Magog.
Oh, what?
There's Magog and Gog. So I'm telling y'all, there's something to this article that it just grabbed my attention. Like nothing has grabbed my attention this strongly in a long time. I don't. There's something here. Guys can just kind of take from it what the Lord wants you to take from it. But this is a good article. We'll link it or something so you guys can read through it.
Well, I think what's interesting, you always see on these old maps, you see all these castles.
And that's what I was going to say. Yeah,
that's like a ton of castles up in this place. This definitely, you definitely. What makes me always curious is like the Tolkien mythologies, the Tolkien mythos of like the Lord of the Rings and all that stuff.
Yeah,
this definitely looks like one of those maps. And I do kind of always wonder like where like did Tolkien got these stories from? If he didn't get it directly from some demon, like they're so intricate and like just detailed about these different peoples, these different places, and there's so much depth to these stories.
Yeah,
it's insane that anybody could come up with that. And I do wonder, like, I don't know, just like the way that the mountains are shown on there, I just get vibes of like the Lord of the Rings. Like that's what it shows, like them traveling around Middle Earth.
That's what I was going to say, Middle Earth.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is crazy that on the right it says America over there.
What's that word under America? Can you make that out?
I don't like I said they're getting a little fancy with the fonts.
Yeah,
they're losing. It's like is that a A or is it a IA?
That's another thing. Why did we quit writing like that?
Because nobody could realize what the F anyone was trying to say.
I bet back then they knew what it said, but you know what I mean? It'd be like trying to read some of this chicken scratch people write today.
They were thinking like, we won't have to explain this. Everyone will know this in 1,000 years.
Go out of that real quick. There's another map. Go down, and it's with Tin Duck and America. Go down.
There's one with
that's interesting.
Tartaria.
Well, that's interesting. Even on this map, obviously, like where they're depicting what seems to be America, right? That's I mean, that's Alaska, right?
Yeah, they're showing.
So that's pretty accurate, huh?
I think they're trying to show. I remember reading this now. There's something about that boat right there. How someone got from America to Tartaria back then. And Azareth. Azareth is in the middle of is in between Tartaria and Alaska.
It's kind of weird.
Argon. Formerly a Christian kingdom under Prester John of Asia, established by St. Thomas the Apostle, Didymus Thomas.
What?
Yeah.
You know, I remember hearing a long time ago that Thomas went to Asia. You know,
this map
I wonder if this is where this idea comes from.
Probably. So this map is probably a lot older than what we're told here. What's the rest of it say? So that Romans would not correspond to the church and were subject to Prester John of Africa, and before he was defeated by the Goths, it was known as Cru Ramu Azareth. Here, the 10 tribes retreated and changed from the Tartar area to Scythia. Since then, they are called Goths or Gothans, confirming God's highest glory. And here lies the splendid kingdom of Cathal. Man, that's interesting. All these kingdoms and stuff, and that's from 4 Esdras, chapter 13.
That's interesting because that's what Brian and I were just reading through a couple weeks ago. Yeah, that's like there's a lot of just interesting things. I'll just say this: I'm not so much for that lost tribe stuff because I just don't think that's really how, like the way that people kind of view it. It's like this whole tribe just decided to get up and move. What really happened was that these people rebelled against God. And then they were taken into captivity, and typically during I think specifically in when the Assyrians took people into captivity, they spread everyone out, and then they intermix with them. So that tribe lost their identity altogether because they were not homogenous. And I mean that's the only thing. That's the main reason God kept them all together is so they would be homogenous. And so once they were taken out of that land, it wouldn't be that way. And so even after the Babylonian captivity, and you had the decree from Cyrus the Great for them to come back into the land, all the tribes that were faithful to God went back into Judea. And so that so you had all 12 tribes that were willing to go back, lived around Jerusalem. And I think that's why there was this angst between them and Samaria, which used to be a part of, them and the rest of Israel. So when people say lost tribes, they make it sound like that there's these people who are like the tribe of Dan just hanging out somewhere, just like Beetlejuice.
Oh yeah,
what are you guys doing over here in Tartaria? We're just hanging around. What we're doing over here.
Dude, this over here to the left is super interesting too. It's talking about Tabor, kind of shrink at just a little. So Tabor or Tibur, center of the area of the Tartars, where once the holy books got lost, yet they were united under one king. What? United under one king, who in 1540 first reached France, and King Francis, and later at the initiative of Charles V, was burnt at the stake for his heresy because he had secretly endeavored to convert Christian kings to the Jewish religion, about which he had spoken with Charles V.
What?
Dang. And what's that below it? Here they mastered.
We had our first Zionist burned at the stake.
Wait. Yeah. When were we taught about the printing press? When did that get invented, supposedly?
It had to be right around then, right? When was the Geneva Bible?
1560.
Okay, so it's 1540.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that says
something like that.
Yeah, tangent. Here they mastered the art of printing 1,000 years ago. That doesn't line up with when we're taught the printing press was invented. That says 600 AD.
That's pretty interesting. That's interesting.
What if
so all these old books, I guess that's the thing. It's really people have to go check some of the stuff out to obviously this is confirmed, but it is nice that this guy obviously gave all the references and stuff like this. I think I can't get enough of these old maps though.
I love these old maps.
To be honest, I love the old maps.
Let's look at the next one.
Okay, see that.
10.
You want to read anything on here? Let me know. Stop me if you see anything.
Okay.
The Emperor Lord of the Tartarians.
Yeah, this is a good one.
Baptized in the Christian faith and established peace between. Yeah, we should probably read that. That's interesting.
Yeah, read that one, JT. Yeah, read that
Okay,
one.
it says, "First, myself being emperor and lord of the Tartarians will be baptized in the faith which the Christians hold to at this day, wishing and advising all my subjects to do like, not intending to force any thereunto. To your second, we will and agree that there will be a perpetual peace between the Tartarians and Christians, touching the matter
What?
of the Holy Land. Okay, we say that if we could conveniently, we would willingly go hither in person for the reverence we bear to our Lord Jesus Christ. But
Wow.
because we have many occasions of importance to stay us in these parts, we will take order with our brother Haloon for due accomplishment of that service in all points as behooveth for the freeing of the city of Jerusalem, that's got to be Jerusalem,
Oh,
and
Jerusalem,
all
has
yeah.
the
to
Holy
be.
Land in the hands of the pagans and
Out of the
restoring it to
hands.
the Christian.
That's I
Out of the
forgot,
hands
almost
of the
forgot about that
pagans.
Oh,
clip.
that's what I say.
Yeah,
I don't think you said out, but he was delivering him out of it.
Out
yeah.
of the
Yeah.
hands of the pagans and restoring it to the Christians.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what that's basically saying is Genghis Khan went to Jerusalem to free it from the pagans and to restore it back to the Christians, to give it to the Christians. And that
Mm,
makes me
That's
think of a passage in Revelation. I wish I could remember specific chapters and like the verse numbers and stuff better. But doesn't it talk about the holy city being trodden underfoot by the Gentiles for a certain
right.
period of time, and then it was to be taken away from
Wasn't
them?
it for 42 months, wasn't it?
Yeah, 42 months. Or
Yeah.
or is that when he said a time, time, and half a time?
No,
It's one of the
I
two.
think
You'll find it. I know
I'll
you'll
look it up.
find it quick. But yeah,
Yeah.
so we were taught that Genghis Khan was like this savage Mongol. I don't remember being taught he was a Christian at all.
I
But
just looked it up. They say he wasn't, but I don't know that they wouldn't say something that was untrue.
of course they would. But these old books from the 1500s obviously confirm he was a Christian.
Well, it is interesting that I know that one of the things that Brian and I were talking about on the last episode of the Ancient Angels podcast was about the fact that like in the Chinese and Japanese characters, they're all like biblically oriented. Like all the like you can kind of see like what their words mean and like the way their characters are drawn up. And I think that does not fit with the mainstream narrative. So maybe this would be a reason to deny it. That like if these ancient languages like literally look like they have roots all the way back to the days of Noah, and like the understanding like the story of the Garden of Eden, the book of Genesis and all that stuff. It makes sense to me that that if this stuff was true, they wouldn't want us to know that it was true.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree 100%.
Hey, so I found that verse. It's Revelation 11:2, and it was 42 months. It says, "But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread under foot 40 and 2 months."
Wow, that's interesting because according to this,
Well,
part of one of his conquests was to restore Jerusalem back to the Christians, basically taking it from the pagans who are Gentiles.
Dude,
well, I
this
think
would
it. I
make the
think.
best movie in the world right
Dude,
now.
would
Well,
it not?
I think this. What
Dude,
this
this
is.
is so epic.
Epic.
Well, I think, but this is kind of like. I mean, if anything, it's talking about the Crusades.
Yeah.
The real
I mean,
Crusades,
that's what I mean. I think that's
though.
what it's saying because it's saying like that the people who control Jerusalem now are not Christian. So that obviously before this is not the Romans being sent to destroy Jerusalem. This is later.
Mm,
It makes
Yeah,
sense that again like the people in that region they still would have been some rebellious people trying to go back in, and maybe that's what happened because Christianity spread throughout, and obviously that Jesus tells the woman at the well that there's coming a day when you can worship God in spirit and in truth. So you don't need like no one needs to go into Jerusalem to worship there. And if you
right.
really
yeah.
think about what happened there, based on what we know of history and what God says is going to happen there, it was not a great place to be. It was a place that was made desolate. So maybe by the time it started to, I don't know, be somewhat livable,
Again, yeah.
the only people there were probably people who were very far from God.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah, pagans. Yeah, pagans. That's interesting.
Kabbalists.
Kabbalists. So it also talks about making, a perpetual peace between Christians and Tartarians, which the Tartarians are Christians, but maybe at some point they weren't. My thing is, where are the Tartarians today? We've found way too much evidence to dismiss them as, some myth. We know the Tartarian Empire was in fact real, and there's still remnants. Their architecture is still all over the place. So I wonder, where do you guys think they went? And where did Gog and Magog go? That's what baffles me. Like, did they just, I don't know,
take it off the map or what?
Did they just take it off the map? And after some sort of reset, those people didn't even know they were Tartarian or Gogian or Magogians? I mean,
I think it's like the same way that I was saying, like about the tribes, like that when they got conquered, they did not have a national identity anymore. So they either got hauled off into captivity. The ones that stayed were oppressed. Maybe they were taken as plunder to enemies. The Rufs, whoever moved into Russia, and they are the ones, maybe the Khazars, people like that. They took over different parts of it. And so, yeah, they lost their national identity. I was even thinking about, like, in the Bible, how it says that, when the Ammonites are kind of double cross the Israelites, and God says, go take them out and wipe their name out under heaven. And so, we're going to remove every record of these people. I think that obviously happened a lot. That these people, it's like they never existed.
Yeah.
Because we're wiping out all the record they ever existed. Now, luckily for us, there is a lot of still record of it. But I mean, it does seem like it's just a very obvious thing that it is covered up in this kind of way. And maybe, maybe people are just saying, like, the Scythians and the people, like, given different names for it. Even it's funny, like, even like the Greeks, it's like that Greece was a place, but not everybody in there called themselves Greek. I mean, they were all Greeks, but, like Alexander the Great was a Macedonian. So you have different names for it. Even like in the land of Canaan, that there was, how many kings did the Israelites conquer? And there wasn't like 30 different kings.
Oh yeah, it was a bunch.
It seems like a very small place as far as, like, from what we can perceive, like that Israel is about the same size as New Jersey. And then you have it divided up into like 30 different. No, yeah, it's the same size. It's like you imagine like a place like New Jersey being divided up into 30 different kingdoms.
It doesn't make sense to me.
It's kind of like a world that we just can't even wrap our minds around.
Yeah,
like what it all means.
Seriously, yeah, that's wild. When you put it like that, JT, again, my mind goes to thinking the only country that I can imagine so many kings, right, and kingdoms, America. Like, if Utah was Judah, you'd have a king there, the king of Judah. And then look at all the 50 states. We have a governor in each state. What if there were kings in each state? Not what we call governors today, but, they would have been kings back then. I don't know, man.
I think you could make a good case just based on all the state capitol buildings. It's like, could a king have lived there? I mean,
yeah,
there was something going on there. I mean, I think that's the idea. It's like that even in the Bible, sometimes it's like a prince. I mean, but a prince is of a principality, right? It's a place that a prince rules over. And to me, it's like the way that the Bible uses a prince, it's like that's the same thing as a king. It's like it's really not a different position. It's not like a prince is under a king. It's like the prince rules this place. I wonder how much of it is just a lost in translation thing of how we perceive kings versus how kings in all actuality were they more like governors,
right?
Or maybe I mean, a king had a kingdom, right. And then obviously an emperor had something different. But I even read a book about the Roman Empire once, and emperor was not a grander title than a king. The reason why the Romans had emperors, at least is what we're told. Again, this could be just all BS, but it was that because the Romans had a republic, and they weren't supposed to have like a king who did everything. So it was almost like that when Julius Caesar supposedly took the title of dictator, it was not actually a bad thing. It was actually it was like it had a I guess the connotation was that it wasn't as they weren't being lorded over by a king. A dictator dictated things that they did, like as the government did, I guess.
Yeah.
And then an emperor was not as grand a title as a king, because you can't have a king if you still have like a republic and a different kind of branch of government. And it was like that Caesar Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, he had all these different titles over all these things, which basically gave him full authority. But he didn't want anyone to know that, because he didn't want people to think that he was a king. Kind of interesting, but we view it as an emperor is way bigger than a king.
Yeah, we do.
Based on probably looking backwards, like hindsight, but it didn't used to be like that.
Yeah. So this is interesting too, where it mentions Pope Innocent IV, Bishop of Rome, sent his friars to the court of the Great Khan. They pleaded for peace in the name of Christianity. So I was under the impression back then the Pope was it. He was the final authority. He was the most powerful person pretty much on earth back then. But according to this, he was pleading with the Great Khan for peace. He was afraid of Genghis Khan, obviously. But here's what's I sent you, Ricardo. Can you zoom in on these dates here? As you can see, it keeps talking about in the year of our Lord. But those
this is 1228, 1241, 1242.
That one,
or
look how
1212
far the one is in front of the two. That looks like, okay, any of them. Zoom in on 1162.
Here's what I was saying. Here's what I was saying though. Like, yeah, but here's what I'm saying. Like when I was saying that, it does just seem like they write their ones funny, because what year is this? Because that eye looks like this looks like an eye as well. You know what I'm saying? Like in the year 1212. Because if that's an eye too, but that's used as a one for sure.
When you zoom in, you can clearly, if you can see, if you can zoom in, you'll see what I'm talking about. They look different. They're written. See, look at the 1241. You can't. I don't know, dude.
But I mean, look, I think the 1241. I think it looks.
It's spaced though.
It's
spaced, it seems like,
and it's kind of slanted. That almost looks like a J or an I, and it's different than the one behind the 4. And what's up? I don't know. Why the extra space? You know what I mean? And they are calling this the year of our Lord.
It's closer to the 4 than it is to the 2. I'll admit that.
Yeah, but if you look at the characters all around the whole written, it's not like it was like somebody used a typewriter. It's like lots of the words, lots of the letters look janky.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like look at the word "great." It looks like it's written really funny looking.
Yeah, it's in like italics.
Even Genghis looks like it's kind of written in like it just looks funny the way it's written.
It's like italicized.
Yeah.
Like there's something off about it. That's why I said, but it's like you have 1212 and 1241. I mean, I can see that the letters kind of look slightly different, but it almost look like they just use eyes for ones.
I don't see why they would. Yeah, but why would they do that? Why would they use an eye for a 1?
I don't know.
Like in
why do we use an O for a 0?
Well,
good point.
an O is more circle and a 0 is more oval, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, correct when you type it. So when you write it, how much different does it look?
So it says this. Let's read it. Much. Let's see if any of the context will help us here. So, after certain years, they had elected among them king called Genghis. That's what his name was to start with, till God told him to change it to Genghis, I believe. Called Genghis, whom for the greatness of his glory and victories they added the surname of Great. This Genghis, departing from his own territories in the year of our Lord, That's either I-162 or 1162. But it says the year of our Lord. So I'm thinking this was during the millennial reign.
Or it's only 62 because it's got 2 eyes.
That's what I said.
It could be the year 62. Yeah. In the year 1212,
we skip the ones altogether, so the next year is 22.
Hey, what if it's kind of like I don't know.
This says they spoiled Russia. They invaded and spoiled Russia.
Yeah, see that's really interesting because I learned about let's just say I learned about some people from the Khazarian Empire. And they got purged out, which I was told by the Rufs, who would be the modern day Russians. Yeah, and those people I believe came from kind of the Nordic lands, and when the people from the Khazarian Empire went to all around Europe, and they spread around there, and they lost their homeland. So if you guys have looked into that, you guys can look into that yourself.
Yeah,
and get the references.
Yeah, man, that's what I'm saying. This article is just, it's got a lot in it, man. It's a lot to unpack. It's a lot to read and kind of speculate digest. It's wild. So it's like 2 over. It mentions Jehovah. What's that one about? Down at the bottom. Just scroll down a little.
Same thing.
Yeah, hit the arrow.
Yeah, there you go.
Arrow
to the right.
Scroll arrow. No, to the right.
The swipe arrow to the right.
There you go.
The next one. Oh, that's talking about gospels and evangelists. So this one about celestial.
Ooh, look at this one in celestial Jerusalem. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, read that one, JT.
It says, in this celestial Jerusalem, the word of formerly communicated by God to Moses is found. This word is Jehovah, lost on the earth, but which he invites us to find in great Tartary, a country still governed even in our days by the patriarchs, but which he means allegorically to say that this people most nearly approach to the primitive condition of perfection of innocence. Wow. Let me read that again. This people most nearly approach to the primitive condition of the perfection of innocence.
Wow. I don't know exactly what that is saying, but it kind of sounds like just what it says, they went kind of back to a primitive state where they were nearly perfect, because wasn't, Adam and Eve, they don't get more primitive than that, and they were made perfect.
Well, if this was in the millennial reign and they were just worshiping the Lord that way, and they knew fully where they were in the timeline and everything, how close could you have been to God? And how, like you're saying, the innocence. So that's what the world tries to do, is corrupt our innocence and to make us perverted.
Maybe it's like a child. Maybe it's like a childlike state of like faith in God before you knew what was wrong and right, and you just had a childlike want to please your parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it says they found that state in the Great Tartarian, and it's interesting. It talks about the celestial Jerusalem.
Yeah, all the way back to formerly communicated by God to Moses. So that is, I find that really interesting that heavenly Jerusalem does show up in places in the Bible, but it's very sparse.
Yeah,
and it makes sense that, like, I think that long ago I had the misconception that New Jerusalem was like a new creation in the Book of Revelation, but it's clearly not. It just descends, and then you see it show up in other places in the Bible. But so when was it created? I guess it was always there.
Yeah,
and maybe
just like God.
Yeah, maybe that was the whole thing, was that there was always this celestial Jerusalem, and there was a earthly representative in the same way that there was the tabernacle before the temple. There was always a temple in heaven.
Yeah.
And so where was the temple in heaven?
Yeah.
It was in celestial Jerusalem.
Uh-oh, JT got froze.
I know.
Oh no. Of course, when we there he is, he's moving again.
Hey,
did I freeze or something?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
Okay.
froze.
you're good now. What was he saying before that?
Oh,
What
what
was
did
it?
I
Shane?
say? Or what did you
Yeah,
say?
yeah,
I
because
was
you
just
froze
saying
up.
like yeah that all the things on earth that God had Moses build and eventually the Israelites probably built was that they were representations of things that were in heaven. So if there was a temple in
Mm-hmm.
heaven, where was it? It was in heavenly Jerusalem. So there was even the city down to the city was that's what God showed Moses was things that were in heaven, and that's why he built them. They built them on earth.
Yeah, and I
Mm.
think that's a lot of this architecture too. And I had this concept of, and I know people hear this term and it sounds like it's like a trigger, the as above, so below. But I think that that concept that they got that from, like a lot of them are trying to replicate what is in heaven. You know what I'm saying? Because that was their first
Ooh,
estate.
you know
Mm.
what? That is. You know what's really interesting is that I like going back to the book of Exodus, and if you think about it, like that. So God gave very specific. I mean, almost like to the. It's difficult to read some of the Old Testament books because there's so much detail about how to build things.
Mm,
I mean, when you start to hear all the details in the tabernacle and stuff, that's tough for me to read. But if you think about it, like I don't believe that angels built these buildings. I don't think that the saints built these buildings. But what if they got very specific instructions from God how to build these things?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it even says, I think it is in I forgot Beelzebub. I can't remember his name. And that God puts his spirit in this man who's um like talented in all the crafts of anything being built. You know what I'm talking about? So he's like, so Moses gets these revelations, and then God puts his spirit in this man to build all the things that he wants built. So, I mean, in that same way, like, why couldn't that happen during this time? And I think that for sure that it did. I think that that makes sense to me that how did men do it? God told them how to do it, and then he put his spirit in certain men to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Yeah.
And also, yeah, I mean, so did that mean they didn't have tools? Of course they had tools. So they
of
must have
course.
had they still had ways to do it. And maybe they taught them how to make all the tools to build it too.
And they had technology probably.
They
Yeah.
did. They did. Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
That's
Star
very
Force and
interesting.
all that stuff, all the thing. We were even talking about that earlier today. Ricardo and I were talking
Yeah.
about the Star Force. We have to maybe do like a detailed dig into that because I think that's like the
Yeah, you're talking about the terraforming.
yeah. I think that that's one of these things that John Levi talks about a lot. That I think it's overlooked is because we're staring up at a building, but sometimes you see like these cities, like in New York City, Manhattan, and basically any major city in around the world that has ports. There is so much that they would have had to do to the ground and right at the edge of the water to be able to do that. That's what people are rightfully so talk about. Like we talk about the Statue of Liberty in this community about like the representation of potentially like Apollo or the devil himself being represented through that. But really interesting, it's the base is a star fort, and even Ellis Island itself doesn't look like a natural island. It looks like it was made. And so you think about like if that was made in that certain time period, that's really, really advanced. It makes no sense. And that's just one example of many all around the country, from the canals that are everywhere, and just just the way that the ports we have.
Yeah.
That would take so much time and expertise to do that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't even begin to imagine how much time that and expertise that took to build some of those. Because some of them are on islands out in the middle of the ocean, aren't they? Those star
Well,
forts.
that's what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
there's so many of these buildings. Like you just go look at some of them, and the buildings go up all the way to the water. Like so, if you think about like based on these people getting over there on their wooden ships, and they find an island. Well, I imagine it had some kind of sandy beach.
Yeah.
But so you couldn't really build, like, so normal people would not be able to build unless you had some kind of expertise, but they have these kind of like these bulkheads and everything that go straight down into the water. They must have to use so much concrete to get
Wow.
that,
I didn't even
to
think of that.
Yeah.
yeah, like to get so you had something, because you imagine if it was a normal place, like if you had to build the house there, if you built it right at the edge of the water,
That'd be a
it would sink.
nightmare.
It would sink.
Yeah, that'd be a nightmare.
Oh,
It would
yeah.
sink. It would obviously erosion would be a big problem, but you don't ever hear them talking about those kind of problems in our infrastructure because somebody else built that stuff and it'll last forever. It's kind of like the idea of like what somebody was even saying, like some kind of Roman concrete actually gets harder. It gets solid under the water.
Yeah.
It's some kind of process it goes through where like actually the salt water makes it actually get harder.
Wow.
The same.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, these people are super advanced.
That's insane.
The same with certain types of wood under salt water, because the minerals and everything, it will actually petrify super fast. And like, these wooden beams become like concrete beams quickly
Right.
underwater.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that we have to do a deep dive into that. I think that would be a good one just to we got to show all the pictures to kind of see what people are talking about. Like, I think so many of these things, even like where we go down, not real far from you, David, like the Outer Banks of North Carolina.
Yeah.
That all these kind of like barrier island places, like it seems like that's, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like that would that have really held up over thousands of years without being wiped off the map by all the storms that came through there?
You wouldn't think so, because there's been some doozies come through there. So,
Well, you see what they have to do now. It's like they have to fight to save them.
yeah.
So it's like if people weren't there to try to protect their homes, those places would be gone.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right? So but we're told nobody was doing that for forever until we got here.
That's crazy.
So what if somebody else actually built those barrier islands, put them there?
That's interesting.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. That actually makes sense given what we know about the cathedrals and all these old world structures. They certainly had the knowledge to build something like that back then that would last, a very long time.
Oh yeah, and to tie it in, what I found really interesting. So in John Levi's book, I think it's Old World Evidence. If you guys haven't not checked that book out, it's really interesting. It focuses mostly on San Francisco, but there's a section talking about I guess it's I think it was John White, I believe, was one of the first British guys to come down here and found a colony, and that was the Roanoke Island colony, the Lost Colony. So
Okay.
Jamestown, up the road from me, is the first supposedly English settlement, but they had a one that was earlier, I think from the early 1500s, was down in Roanoke Island, and that's the one where John White went back to Great Britain supposedly to get supplies. He didn't come back for 3 years though, which is weird. Yeah, thanks, buddy. You get supplies and come back for 3 years.
Dang.
But when he gets back,
kind of like
gone.
the astronauts on.
Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe he went up to space for a minute.
Went to space with 8.
But yeah, so he goes. When he comes back, they're gone. But the interesting part about that story was that in John Levi's book, he mentions that John White did these very detailed maps of that area that are like still good today, like really good how the cartography that they worked out. And anyways, on one of these old maps, there was a patch over this certain kind of fork in the river. There's like a river that forks out, and there's a patch right over between where it forks. And I guess they use some kind of, I don't know if it's called LiDAR, if it's on a map, if it's that shallow, but they found out what was under the patch, and it was a star fort.
Oh, wow.
Really?
So you think about that. This is like before Jamestown. There was a map made of this place, and there was a star fort there. So we know that those people that became lost did not build a star fort. So that star fort was already here.
Yeah.
So who built the star fort? And that's
That's the ultimate question.
That's the $1 million question.
Probably
Yes.
the Tartarians.
Yeah, it makes sense. All these, yeah, definitely Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
wild.
did you have anything, Shane, you wanted to touch on? We're getting a little up there in time. If you have anything else you'd like to add.
I mean, no, I mean, we could come back and revisit some of this stuff, in another episode. I'm like you, it's almost 10 o'clock here, so I hate to. I mean, the only thing. Okay, this is it. So I've always wondered why did they go from being called Israelites and Hebrews, and where did the Jews come from? Why, you know what I mean? Why they all of a sudden?
Dude, you're going to try to get us in trouble on the very end of this podcast.
Oh, that's right.
No, I'm just kidding. No, that's an interesting question because I think they say the first time the word Jew comes up in the Bible is in the book of Esther, right?
Yeah. Well, and
it's about,
this article tells you why.
Oh, really? What does it say?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. And it's not far from where we just were, but it's, I'll just read it real quick. This is from the Apocalypse revealed by Emmanuel Swedenborg in 1766. Okay. Of the 12 tribes of Israel, 2 of the tribes, I was wrong a while ago. It's Judah and Benjamin. 2 of the tribes, Judah and Benjamin, united into a single tribe, whom then called themselves Jews. And get this, and declared that Jesus Christ was a false prophet. And the other 10 tribes went northwest into Tartaria and became Christians. The Tartarians accepted Jesus Christ and became a Christian nation who fought to restore Jerusalem back to the Christians. So that's
I don't know about that one. I think that's malarkey right there.
Well, the Jews we got today, they do reject Jesus.
Well, no, but I think that's the thing. It's like that. The term, I guess, again, it's like it's a modern word. I've heard other people say that it's a translation that we have now, but what they might have been a proper pronunciation, they would have been Judahites.
Yeah,
because they would have been from Judah.
Yeah.
And but it is, I do think it's really interesting that word Jew comes up not much in the Old Testament.
Not at all, does it?
Well, like I said, it's in the book of Esther.
Okay.
It comes up.
I'll check it out. It's a lot in the New Testament for sure.
Yeah, well, obviously it's all over the New Testament, but I think that's
a transliteration.
Well, but I think that again, like that, if you pay attention, and when there's the second Exodus, when they go out of captivity,
Babylon.
Yeah, it's like all the 12 tribes are told to go back and rebuild the temple, to go back into that area.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when that's when your tribes get mixed together, right? And that's where like that the lost tribes come into it, because Paul is in Jerusalem, but he's of the tribe of Benjamin. He's not in the tribe of Judah. I don't know. I've tried to look it up at one point to see if you could find out what the other disciples were, what tribes they were, but it doesn't say. Yeah. At the end of the day, like that, when people do get it, I think even today they get it twisted because it's about belief. So the ones who believed, they weren't of this certain tribe. They were children of Abraham. They were true Israel.
Yeah.
And what is true Israel? It's like God only knows in the 144,000 who are the individual tribes. That's always been kind of like a mystery to me, but God knows.
Yeah.
And there was maybe there was only 144,000, which is not a lot. 12,000 from each tribe.
That's not a lot. I kind of believe that was being kind of literal, but I may be wrong, but it's a very specific number from the 12 specific tribes.
No, I mean, I think that probably was literal, but I mean, I think was it in in the book of Galatians when it says that, basically those who believe are the true Israel of God.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's only the book of Revelation gets into the real specifics of 12,000 from this tribe and this tribe.
Right.
I mean, I have no reason to believe it's not literal. But yeah, then somebody mentions a great multitude. So there is this very specific number, and that's probably the remnant that was saved. The remnant that believes before the end, they were saved. But then you had this innumerable multitude, and that was everyone else.
Yeah.
Who believed.
And you know what's sad about that is it should have been the other way around. They were God, you know what I mean? They were God's chosen people, fought with them and for them for 4,000 years up until that point, right? Yeah, about 4,000 years, and then offer all of them except a measly 12,000 from each tribe. Everyone else turned their back on him, rejected his only son, rejected their only Messiah. And here, the great multitude that you can't even number is from all the other nations who used to be pagans, right? And heathens.
Well, that's what it says. I think when Brian was reading through for Ezra's, it's really interesting because it was basically like that he's getting this prophecy, Ezra is, and obviously he's grieved by it because it's the same way that Paul is. It's like that he can't help but be sad for his kinsmen who don't believe.
Yeah.
But it's like the people who see are going to reject it, but the people who never see, and that's why I think that's what Jesus says, that blessed are you who've seen and believed, but more blessed are you those who haven't seen and believe.
And still believe.
And so I mean, you really think about like how supernatural move of the Holy Spirit and God it is that the people who don't see any of this, they have no connection to Moses. And they believe it just based on faith. And I think that's exactly what the kingdom is. Is like, because without a sovereign, real, active God, I think that's what people really have really lost in, like, whether the little season is true or not. It's like that people just take for granted that everyone just became Christians at some point in this world. Not, I mean, I know not literally everyone, but I mean,
just about.
Yeah, just about. It's like literally it's dated everything. And people don't think that as like, well, when are we going to get the millennial kingdom happen? It's like, like, you know what I'm saying? Like that they really just can only see things through fleshly eyes.
Exactly.
Like, well, when did this happen? And you're like, what about when the emperor of Rome said, go conquer in the name of like basically Jesus, like in this name.
Yeah.
Like that is a bigger deal than people ever give credit for, because you said, because the previous history before that was these people, they were like literally dragged out of Egypt, like dragged because they wish they could go back right away.
Right.
And they were seeing all the miracles and they were still rejecting it. Like just step by step. And so like it went from that to people who believe without ever seeing any of it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. A miracle.
That's a miracle. Yeah. That's the miracle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It says without faith it is impossible to please God too.
Yeah.
So I mean that's basically, faith is not just belief either. It's action. Like it says, faith without works is dead, and not to be hearers of the word only, but doers of the word. I think that's in Hebrews chapter 11 when it's talking about, that's a faith chapter, and it says like, by faith Abraham did this, like he had an action because of his belief in God. And I think that's ultimately what true real faith is. Not only that you just believe in him, but that you believe on him.
You show
and you trust in him. Yes.
Yeah, I like it. I think Connor, who brought it up, said it the last time we did a chat, was just that, if you think faith, think more like loyalty.
Yes.
Like that. Yeah. Like I think that's probably the proper way that we can kind of understand what faith is that you're loyal to someone. And so
faithful.
when you're loyal to somebody, like that is an action.
Right.
Sometimes it's inaction and something that would wrong them, but it's also action and something you would do when you're loyal to someone.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why, like, people do as they kind of bastardize faith and they kind of combine it with belief. It's like, well, I believe, and that's what faith is. But yeah, but faith is more than faith is the action.
Yeah.
It can be the action or it could be inaction. But yeah, I think loyalty, it makes more sense because people know what it is to be faithful in a marriage.
Yeah,
right.
True.
And that's basically if we're the bride of Christ, well then you'll act a certain way if you're faithful to to Jesus.
Yes, like with what Ricardo was saying, when James said, "Show me your faith without your works, and I'll show you my faith by my works."
Yeah, I love that.
Right.
I love that.
Right.
Show me your faith apart from your works, and I'll show you my faith by my works. I love that.
Yeah, the two cannot be separated, and the fact that people are even trying to separate them shows you where their heart is. You know what I mean? Their heart's in the world because they want to live, wicked and go strip clubs every weekend, and God only knows what. And then Sunday morning, long as they go to church and pretend like they believe in Jesus, they're going to make it to heaven. Now, I'm not saying they're not, but it's you can't divide faith and works. They go hand in hand, just like Jesus said. I mean, whoever abides in Him brings forth much fruit.
Yeah.
And if you're not bringing forth fruit, it's because you're not abiding in Him.
Yeah. Right. Amen to that.
And
amen.
We know what He said happens to those branches that aren't bringing forth fruit.
They're good for nothing except for kindling, basically.
Kindling.
Yep. Kindling.
That's a simple way to put it.
Right. Well, it's been a great discussion. Do you have anything you'd like to close off with, JT?
No, that's it. Yeah, obviously, I want to end it by. Well, you guys can close this out because I'll close out the whole thing. But yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, I really thought that was interesting. I think that it gives us another rabbit hole to go down because I don't know what's putting me off from looking more into Tartaria, because I do think that that's interesting to look into that, because so much of us have just written it off as this a psyop to take away from something grander. But I do, like I said, I always point to my map up here where it's on there. Something significant about it. And I think the fact that it has been written out of our history books or ripped out of our history books does make me think that there's something that they're hiding. So, I need to dig more in and look more into it. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Interesting stuff, David.
Yeah, no problem. Just a few weeks ago, me and Ricardo, and maybe that was a podcast we had with you. No, who was that? Yeah, shoot, I can't remember the guest we had, but we had actually came to that conclusion that we thought Tartaria was just a psyop to distract people from the millennial kingdom.
With Paul.
That was with Paul. But I think we had it wrong. It's part of the kingdom. It's, you know what I mean? It's that's why it was hidden.
Yeah, I think it's. I think the real problem is that it's it was a word used without a lot of understanding of the greater
concept
deception. So the fact that you say this is a Tartarian building, you're just saying, that's why I always call it just an old world.
Yeah.
Like it was a time before this. So saying everything's Grand Tartary, I think that's inaccurate, but obviously there was a Grand Tartary, took up a big part of Asia. So I mean, it was very significant. But I do think that people probably have used it to try to subvert the truth by saying, oh, there were the Tartarians and they were really advanced and they were this and they had this empire that was worldwide. And it's like, no, I think that's the psyop, is people trying to take the baton and lead it into a direction that leads it away from Jesus. But they're giving you a little bit of truth they're giving a lot of truth with some leaven, some lies.
That good old truth sandwich that's wrapped in lies, you know.
A little arsenic in there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you guys are good, I'm good, and we can just close off right there. And
I'm good.
We hope everyone enjoyed it. We'll leave that information in the description. You guys can check all that out for yourself. And like we always like to say, remember to question the narrative, and God bless.
God bless everyone.
God bless.
I've lived with kings who stood on my wings, broken my strings, they fell with ease. Swam in my tears, soaked in my fears. What am I fighting for? Will it ever be enough? But when no one's listening, that's when it pulls me in. And I wanna play. What's it gonna take for them not to underestimate? What you see is great, you will never break me. If I'm going down, it's not without a fight. It's not without a fight. I thought I warned you. It's not without a fight. There's no tomorrow. It's not without a fight. I thought I warned you. It's not without a fight. Take me, you will never break me. There's power in my silence. You will never see